Yeah.
All right, before I call the meeting to order, please mute your cell phones, if you would. Everyone has a microphone on. Laura coming or?
She's not here.
She's not gonna come? Okay, so everybody's here but Lauren. So it looks like, Mike, is yours not turning on? Here, I'll shut mine off. There you go. So you got it, and I'll share here with Jean, because it's good enough. It'll pick me up. I think everybody can hear me there. So, okay, time being 4 o'clock, I will call the meeting to order for our wind task force. Gary, would you please do a roll call?
Healy.
Here.
Heine.
Here.
Kettering.
Here.
Loest.
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
Welsh.
Here.
Katalik. Burns.
Here.
And Hornstra.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum present. Item number 3 is a financial conflict of interest or a non-financial conflict of interest. If we just go ahead and start with Robert and say yes or no to conflict.
Burns, no. Kettering, no.
Loest, no.
Horstman, no.
Heine, no.
Healy, no.
Nelson, no.
Welch, no.
All right, no conflicts are stated. Item number 4, approval of the agenda. If there are no amendments, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion.
Second.
So a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Agenda is approved. Next, we have approval of the February 15th minutes. Any corrections? I would entertain a motion for minutes as presented.
I move. Approval.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Minutes are approved. At this time, item number 5 is public comment. And since we have no one in the audience, I'm assuming there is no public comment, so I'll close that with no comments made. So we are on to item 6, which is the last item on the agenda, is simply to discuss our wind ordinance. So right at the beginning, I want to get a couple things out of the way before I forget. There was an email forwarded about a, let me see, what are they calling it? It's a public scoping meeting for the Swan Lake Wind Project. And so everybody got a copy of that email, and I wanted to make sure the public, if they're listening, if you go to the WAPA.gov, so that's WAPA.gov, and you search for Swan Lake Wind Project, on their website will come up an announcement for a public scoping meeting on March 13th between 6 and 8 p.m. So you can call into the meeting, and I think you can zoom into the meeting if you'd like. So if you're interested in that, and on that page they have a map of where this might go, and it does cover Mayfield and Turkey Valley townships. So I did send that information to their 2 township boards, so they are aware, and I asked them to pass that on to their township boards, because the more people who know about the project before it gets going, the more answers can be made with concerns. So that is a 248 megawatt project with a potential 97 turbines. So again, that meeting is on March 13th between 6 and 8 p.m. And if you go to WAPA.gov and search for Swan Lake Wind Project, you can get that information if you are interested. Next thing is, I think at our last meeting, Ronnie Hornstra was here, and it was asked if we could get tours of the projects that are over there. Since they're up and running, you can go and get a tour, what they're about, what they listen to them, etc. Is anybody interested in that? I think Gary sent it to everybody.
No, I just.
Oh, just to me?
This afternoon, so I just sent it to you.
Okay, so,
to discuss.
so there's the question. We've got, Mike, anybody else interested in
I'd like to
going?
go.
And Don?
I would be definitely interested in a field trip.
Okay, so that's at least 4 of us, so, and I did talk to Gary about this, we'll probably ask the planning commissioners, the planning commissioners and the county commissioners if they're interested as well, because technically, we are just suggesting things, and those 2 groups are approving, things, so if they're interested, the only concern we have to consider is quorums for them, not for us, because we're technically not an elected body, so, we'll try to get an interest level and then maybe a couple dates. It would probably be a morning or maybe afternoon thing, and I know some people work, some people don't, so we'll do our best to get maybe 2 different dates or something, so, all right, so that's that. I think that's all of the housekeeping, if you will, that we need to do. We left off last time talking about the egg zone, and we're still focused on the small wind energy conversion systems. Go ahead.
Sherry, could I make a suggestion that when we complete section 2603, or actually small wind energy conversion systems, that we ask Gary to draft what we've agreed on so far, so that we can all see it and come to a final agreement on that part of our task before we start in to the large wind energy conversion systems discussion.
Okay, so I think initially the plan was to consider setbacks for both small and large being, so you have some consistency in your discussion with that. And then to go, so if you're looking at 2603 and you're probably focused on like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, those are all of the details around the projects itself. I looked for that to be the discussion after the setbacks. You know, so right now, the only thing that we have changed so far is the height limit. From 30 feet to 40. We went from 30 to 40, so that's the only thing we've changed so far. Everything else we have kind of left the same. We left only rooftop, we left some of those things. So your point of wanting a draft, I think, is a good one, but I don't think we're quite where we need one yet. I think maybe after today's discussion, we might put that together. Does that seem reasonable?
Sure.
Okay, I understand where you're going with that. We don't want to lose what we've discussed.
Well, that and also that the small wind energy conversion systems are so different from the large commercial wind energy systems in
Yep.
terms of their impact,
Yep,
that I think it would be useful for the group to separate those in their mind. In other words, that, okay, we've come to a conclusion on what the citizens of Yankton County can do, what the rules of the game are on their own property. And they can do those things as long as they don't aggravate their neighbors too much and so forth and so on. So
Yep.
separate that, because when you start talking about the large wind energy conversion systems, now we're talking about a commercial enterprise that includes corporations from outside Yankton County, and so that in my view anyway, the considerations are entirely different.
so with that said, today, we could change that focus and we could finish our discussion on setbacks for the small wind in the ag district, and then step through the rest of 2603. If the group thinks that's a wise thing to do, I'm good with that. And then to start the large wind at our next meeting or at the tail end of whatever we have left here.
That'd be my recommendation.
Would that be okay with everyone to change that focus? I got a lot of thumbs up and head nodding, so we'll do that. So we left off with the setbacks in the ag, and we were discussing, if I remember, in I, so that'd be 2603-1I, is where we currently allow someone to put a wind tower in that's less than 80 feet, as long as they have 20 acres with no CUP. And so we were talking about what's reasonable for a height, and at the end of the meeting, I think if I look at my notes right, we were up to 135 feet for the tower, but it was requested that there be a CUP for these. So the neighbors are alerted of that. And I think the 135 foot was because most towers, the hub height is 120. And so when you go to our definition, you add about 15 for the blades, you would be reasonable there. And then the other thing we talked about, because in an ag district, you're supposed to have 20 acres if you're platting something new, but we have many lots that are less than 20. So we had talked about 5 acres to 20 acres, because at 5 acres, our height is 40 in a residential, and we're talking about 135 in a 20. So do you graduate? So if I had 7 acres, I could add the ratio in there, just the straight line mathematics. And so I could go a little taller, and then find that when I'm at 20, I can be at that 135 foot. That's kind of where we ended that conversation. And we ran out of time. So, and only half of us were here then. We had a couple people who had to leave early and stuff, so. So there's the recap. Discuss. Next.
Also,
Okay.
for consistency purposes, were we gonna move all the definitions to the front?
I think in the end we will, and we can discuss that at the planning commission, because really what our job here is to figure out the numbers, if you will, and then the planning commission's job is to organize it all and present it to the county commission.
Maybe Ryan can do the math in his head, but I can't. On the, let's say you have 20 acres.
So the one problem is like, you know, again, sometimes you say 20 acres and you think of a square, but not everything's a square. And I think too is like, you know, one of the things we look at is setbacks as well. And we do have currently I believe it's the 1.1 times the height of the turbine measurement. For a
Yes,
setback.
correct.
And
That's, yep,
just that in itself creates limitations on the lot itself by requiring that setback, which I think is more important than the raw number of acres, is that having that right setback so that you have a level of safety that, say, this tower collapsing doesn't fall onto your neighbors.
And I think that's a higher standard that's currently out there with trees. Because you could have 100-foot trees right on the line.
Yeah, yeah.
And could be leaning over. So I think it's a pretty prudent safety standard from that regard, the 1.1. I like the graduated 5 to 20. Just keep it simple. At 20, you get this, and at 5, you start here and you go up from there. It's just a simple relationship. And I think it reflects what we've done in the residential zones. It bridges the gap between the residential and the agricultural, I think.
So what's that ratio that you're looking at? The basic one, what's the ratio?
Was it 5 foot per acre?
it's, if we go from 40 to 135, I think, and then from 5 acres to 20, I think it's 6 foot, 6 1/3 feet
Per,
per acre.
okay.
So let me test that. 15. Yeah, I think that's right, and Ryan, you can check my math, but I think that works out pretty good.
How much was it again?
6 1/3 feet, so it'd be 6 foot 4 inches
Per acre.
per acre added over 5.
Mhm.
Yep, so you'd start at 40 at 5, and then you'd go 46 1/3, and step up, and I think you'll end at 135 at 20.
If you just go
That's
even
assuming-
6, you'll end at 130, which I
So,
think is still.
yeah, that's assuming that you're
Yeah,
starting.
I thought about
yeah.
making it simple
Yeah.
like that, Robert.
So you're starting at 40 foot, and then for each acre over,
Just call it 6 feet.
yeah,
Make
you
it
add,
easy.
6 feet.
Yeah.
Well, 6 feet gets you a little bit lower.
Yeah,
6 feet gets you right at 130
130.
at 20.
you know,
And
and
that's total tower height,
That's total tower height.
which is 120 plus 10 foot, which I think is still pretty reasonable.
If you just say 6.5 feet, and then it's 137.5 at 20 acres.
yeah,
And you could just say 6.5 feet per acre, and then just cap it at the 135 max
Yeah.
for all acres.
Yeah.
yeah.
Keeping in mind that this is only in ag zoned areas, so
Mhm.
people in residential and lakeside and all that, they don't have to worry about this, just as, this is only in agricultural zoned land.
Yeah.
Correct, correct. So does that seem a reasonable approach to folks?
And you still have the setbacks.
And we still have a setback.
Still have
Right.
1.1.
And you still have the 1.1, and it's not just from, so that is from structures, property lines, and rights of way, 1.1 times the total height.
Total height, yeah.
Because I'm just thinking about those lots that we saw at planning and zoning. And I know they're out at the lake and stuff, but still, there were some really wonky,
Yeah,
and that's the thing you gotta consider, like you said, yeah.
But those will be residential and
Yeah, and I know
agricultural,
that, but still,
and-
there's gotta be some out there in the county that are a little bit, you know,
okay, so,
Ready for motion?
And that also means that, you're at 135-foot tower height, then your maximum setback is gonna be about 150 feet.
yes, yeah.
So,
I don't think we need a motion. I think we just need general consensus
Consensus.
that everybody's
Mhm.
comfortable with that. I don't see anybody pounding their fists on the table.
Yeah, for
So-
perspective, 150 feet is about a half a block. Half a city block,
mhm.
Yeah,
or half a football field.
yeah. I always relate everything to the 100-yard dash.
Yeah, half of that.
Memories, I guess. Okay, so that essentially takes care, now, the last thing on this is, do we want to require all of these to have a CUP? They have to in the residential. Do we want to require them in the ag to have a CUP as well?
I think so.
I
would say so.
I think anything over 40 feet, once you go over the 40 feet, to have a CUP. Do you think? Maybe.
Well,
Or hold on, do we have a CUP requirement for anything under 40 feet in other zones?
Yeah,
everything has to have a CUP in a residential
Okay,
zone.
everything's a CUP in there.
Everything.
Okay.
The only thing that is not in our current ordinance is in an ag district, if you have 20 acres and it's less than 80 feet.
Mhm.
You can come into Gary and get a building permit and allowance. That's the only thing right now.
Okay.
So if we wanna go, we can go, everything has to have a CUP and just, then there's no question.
Yeah.
That would be
Keep it
my
simple.
recommendation. Consistency.
yeah.
Okay, so that, again, everybody knows, your neighbors know what you're doing. Hopefully,
Mhm.
you tell them anyway, and you don't just plunk something up, but, okay, I'm seeing generally, most people think all CUP, so we'll have to.
It's just, for over 20, I think you should just leave it alone, it's just paperwork. I mean, on a 20-acre lot, 135-foot wind turbine is a spec.
I'm kind of leaning towards not having a CUP too, because I
Right.
mean, exactly how much do we really want to burden ourselves with going through all this for
Well,
something
currently-
that should be
Currently, there's no
Fairly.
CUP, but there is no CUP at the 80 feet. Well, the first application we had was over 80 feet, and it fell in the cracks. Now I think we've given a very generous allowance for the height. I've never seen a small wind turbine, even heard of one over 120 feet, or 135 total height. I think that's very generous. But I think on like 20 acres, it's nothing.
Yeah,
That is true. I mean, you've got silos out there that are
right.
yeah.
pretty tall in an ag zone.
Yeah, I mean, on the over 20, I think it's just generating paperwork. But I did want to point out that, okay, we have the one close to structures. Okay. Owned by the neighbor would be my consideration there. You know, because on a 20-acre lot, especially in rolling terrain, you're not gonna have really many optimal locations unless you're just a plywood sheet. But typically in hills and woods and, you know, we have 18, but I consider there's only like maybe a half an acre that would even be suitable to place this thing. And it would be close to the chicken house. So I have to be 1.1 foot away, 1.1 the height from my own chicken house. I mean, it's obviously my liability if I put one up. I'm not hurting nobody. I think the 1.1 distance should be from the neighbor's stuff, not my stuff.
Well, and if it's already from the property line,
From
hopefully
the
the
property
neighbor's
line.
stuff isn't on your property.
True,
So,
true.
I mean, technically, you could remove the structures, because the residents should take the responsibility on themselves, to that, and to your point of a tree. I remember living in Wichita, Kansas, a big storm, and my son was looking out the window as my husband was looking at the roof, the tree branch just fell on, and my son said, "Oh, Daddy looks so happy." I said, "No, Daddy's not happy." But you see, my point is, at some point, you have to have that responsibility, and it is your stuff.
Yeah,
So-
I'm not in favor of, how would you say, legislating personal responsibility?
So in the setbacks, we could cross out the word structures and just leave property lines and rights of way.
I think so.
And that's a great point of clarification, that the neighbor doesn't have any structures closer than his
Well,
property.
hopefully they're not on your property.
I didn't quite think that was true.
So I wanna really understand this CUP requirement. I'm getting that if you have 20 acres and you're below the 135, you don't need a CUP.
I would agree.
If you have 5 to 20 and you're in your range, you do. Okay, so we'll have to make sure
Yeah.
when we write all of those,
All right, my rationale for being consistent and for everyone, if we're not gonna see it that often, I just think it's a great opportunity for at least everybody involved is going to be having an opportunity to know about it. And so when you're talking about, Jerry, about the neighbors, I'm sure a lot of people don't even know who their neighbors are, let alone knowing what you're gonna do something. So that's where I would be coming from. And also, experience sitting on the planning commission for 15 years with city daycare centers and settings there were issues, and that was critical that neighbors knew about it, and then had a chance again for things to be worked out. So that's where I'm coming from, personal experience.
Try to talk in the microphone.
Oh, okay. That's where I'd be coming from, is personal experience and just encouraging communication. It would be required as versus, oh, I didn't know so-and-so was gonna be doing it. So I'm just one person. Thank
so,
you.
so one part about if, in this difference that we're creating in this ag zone for small wind, we've already said that we're going to limit the heights in this graduated zone. And now we're going to add a CUP, and we've limited the heights because we feel as the lot shrinks, the acceptable height limit should come down. But we've said is once you reach 20, you don't need a CUP, but here, even though you're following our restriction, you do need a CUP. And I'm just seeking clarification there. Is that a deal where if we're not requiring a CUP here at this height, we think is acceptable, and then should we not require it here either? It's kind of a pickle. I mean,
I don't know,
it's.
I just, you know, consistency is an important element in our zoning regulations. We try very, very hard to be consistent and orderly. And it seems to me like here we're creating, if not a gap, at least a perceived gap in fairness.
I agree with the sense of being orderly and consistent. However, we're looking at 7 different zones here, and there's 5 different rules, so that, I think, has already been lost in trying to address each of these zones. You know, if everybody lived in this, if there was no zoning, then, you know, it'd be a different animal. We already have broken this up. There's no way to be consistent. There's all different rules, there's all different groups, there's all different sizes. But I agree, it should be either a CUP or no CUP in an ag zone. And I think for simplicity, based on what you can do in an ag zone, I think, can't you put a building, do you need CUPs to put up buildings and the barns and, storage things and?
No, there's no CUP for that. There's some CUPs for the use of the building, like if it's a certain agricultural use, there are some of those, but not, I mean, you could put up a 50,000 square foot building in an ag zone.
With no CUP?
No
As long as
CUP.
you meet the setback.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
and the
Yep.
height and stuff.
Well, I
And same
think
thing,
that's-
There's no height.
Oh,
in
no,
ag.
you're talking about ag, right?
Yeah,
Oh, okay,
ag,
yeah.
yeah.
and the same thing with like a 100-foot silo. You could put up a 100-foot silo. In an ag zone, you don't need a CUP.
And in the
Yeah.
past, not to say that we're living in the, obviously, we're not living in the past anymore, ag zones pretty much did whatever needed to be done. You throw up a windmill, you put this up, you put that up, you throw a pole up, you string wires. You know, a wind turbine is not a nuclear waste site, it's not pretty benign. I think it's probably simple, just simplest to leave it as what are you calling it, administrative permit instead of permitted use?
Yeah, as
Or
long
special
as,
permitted.
you know, and they still are gonna have to meet everything on the next page unless we change all of that. So they still have to meet a noise requirement and things like
And they're still
that.
gonna have to deal with the utility ultimately, if they're building
Yeah, they're
something
gonna have
that
to.
large, and all those, the state electrical inspector probably, if they're
Yep.
interconnected.
Yep.
There's a lot of other, I think, safety things in there. I
Okay.
would just leave my vote is, we might wanna call a vote on it, maybe see, on the ag
Yeah.
zone.
Probably just a verbal. I mean, okay, so show of hands, how many are okay with no CUP on a 5 acre to 20 acre, 40-foot to 135 graduation
In ag zone only.
in an ag zone only? So, pretty much across the board, so we'll stick with this. I'm gonna make a note, no CUP on that. So, the other point in this is right now, anything over 80 feet on a 20-acre lot can be built with a CUP. So did we put in here, any tower taller than this in these zones has to have a CUP? Are we going to allow them to be taller? Because right now we do.
Sure, I didn't catch that again. You're saying
Okay.
80 feet, we ditched
Well-
80 for 135.
Well, we're at 135 now, but currently, as it reads, and I'll read it. So ag district may qualify for an administrative building permit, as long as they have 20 acres and shall have a total height of less than 80 feet. All other WECs in ag districts are provided in the next section, which is the large wind. So, the person who came in before us a couple weeks ago had a tower that was 120 feet tall. And it was for his personal use, and he had to get a CUP for that. And we ended up approving it.
So can you just say in an ag zone where height limits and setbacks are met, that you can qualify for an administrative permit?
Yeah, that's how this is right now. We've discussed that. If you're less than 135 feet on 20 acres, Gary will give you a building permit.
Okay.
So what happens if I'm 150? I'm in a low spot, and my rep said, you know, if you go 15 more feet, you'll get a lot more wind.
I think the odds of that are pretty slim, because the cost of the tower just
Okay,
dwarfed the generator. Even
Okay.
at 120.
okay, so we're good with, if you're not under 135 feet, you don't get a tower. We're not even going to allow them to apply for an exception. Because if you don't put it in there, they're gonna say, can I get a variance? And I don't wanna go around that discussion again.
How many accessory building as we did through the acres?
And that's why they went to CUPs on them for those, so.
Well, I would just say, you know, see what happens, but I think 135 for small wind is very generous.
So no, no CUPs for anything taller.
No, I don't think so, because my research too shows that really, that's the limit of these small wind systems, is 135, that covers it.
Yeah, that's.
Going
I think
up
that's-
above that is really costly.
And I think
and
there's
not
comes to the point to
effective
get a
for a
permitted,
small
and to get a
system.
permitted use, it's a give and take a little bit. So to take the height cap, which I think is generous for administrative permit, I think makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay, so I think we're done with section 1, A through I.
So really quick question here. We were talking about ag, because you also have larger parcels in ag. And so far, we've really just only talked about having one wind tower.
That was the next question on my list, as we look at small wind. Right now, there is no limit to the number of towers you can have. There's a limit to the size of 100 kilowatts.
Mhm.
So you could put up 10 kilowatt towers, as long as you can meet all the setbacks. Many of the other ordinances I looked at for a private use allowed single towers. Right now, it's all on kilowatts.
There's a couple self-limiters there. Wind, especially that tall, is gonna be like $7 a watt, which is 3 times what solar is. So there's gonna be an economic ceiling there. They're not gonna connect you if the total KW is over 50 anyway.
Well, I think they will, but they'll require you to sell it all and then buy it back.
Well, I think they can, I think they
You know.
require that from the first watt.
Yeah, and that's why in the solar, we went 50
But
or
there's a
less,
cap.
residential.
Well, I think the same cap, the cap for solar that BY has is the same for wind.
Yes.
So that's gonna be, I mean, what are you gonna put? There's a 10, there's a 15 KW, there's 20s and 25s. You know, most you're gonna be able to do is 2.
Okay. So what you're saying is,
I don't think it's a threat.
we don't need to list the word single tower in here anywhere. Any other thoughts? I mean, because technology changes over the years, people do weird things. Sometimes cost doesn't come into the picture. Do we need to say in this section 2603, we're talking about a single tower?
Maybe we can do something of simply as your first one is administrative and any one after that is a CUP.
Well, I'm struggling.
I kinda like that.
I like it too.
Well, see, the thing is with a COP is that if they meet all of the requirements that are listed in the zoning ordinance, the planning and zoning board is pretty much obligated to approve it.
But it does give you a chance to review it with neighbors. Also gives you a chance to possibly put in a condition or something like that to
Yeah.
make sure that it's still suitable.
You've got some wiggle room, so I'm gonna counterpoint.
Mhm.
I've got a section of land, and I come in and I got my 10 kilowatt tower, and I put it on 1/4 of my section, and then I wanna put one on the other corner. I got 160 acres, and I'm asking myself, okay, the first one was okay, why do I need one for the second one? I got 160 acres. But then, you could say, if we put the single in, I can say, well, I got the first one in, and now you're telling me I can't put a second one in.
I think a lot of it is that people don't wanna look at the cluster of them out there. One they can get
Well,
away with, but
I think of, well, this is way back in my past when I was living in California and visited Tehachapi and seeing some of the early wind farms out there, and they were small wind farms they were small towers when, at that time. They have changed quite a bit in Tehachapi, but at that time they were small, and it was when that farm was just starting out. And so it could be that someone would try to generate more power or try to somehow create some type of wind farm activity on 160 acres.
Yeah.
And you have each irrigation system might be metered separately. And under under the law, you can tie, you can't use the power you generate over here on a different meter. That's meter aggregation. We couldn't even get that in Nebraska. You're not even close to it here. So you would have to put a small system to offset at each one if you were going to. So there could be a good reason to do it in the scenario that you described.
I have a perfect example. We have 3 solar wells. What happens if I'd have put in a wind turbine instead to run my wells? 2 of them are on the same parcel of property. It's 320 acre parcel, and we have 2 on there.
We did one with wind in Winnebago to feed a remote buffalo herd, but it was 30 foot. I mean, you're not gonna,
Yeah, they
you're not,
wouldn't have
you
to
don't
be
need to
big,
jack them
no.
up that much.
But
You
it's
don't
an
need-
example
yeah.
of, it could happen.
No, there could be some
I mean, just-
viable
well-
agricultural reasons to do it.
It would fall under this. I mean, even if I put a 30-foot one up, that's my tower. I got one. I mean, if you're putting in, if you say it can only be a single tower, doesn't matter if it's 135 feet or 30 feet. So I just don't want us to back ourselves into a corner, and I know you can't plan for everything, but, and maybe that's why they went with less than 100 kilowatts.
Gary, last commission meeting, we approved a plot on a piece of ground that was like half an inch wide and 4 inches long on the plat book. I suppose it was 60 acres or 50 acres. You could put a series of them right down. You could put 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down the line if you wanted.
But they still have to meet the property line setback on
Yeah,
those,
and
so your line would have to be.
150 feet
Yeah, for a 75-foot tower.
for a 75-foot tower.
Yep,
That's
you're
not
right.
very much.
No, it's not.
A block.
So,
I wouldn't be very happy if I had a piece of property next to it that had 6 or 8 of them in a row.
Yeah, but I think, you know, given our 100 kilowatt limit, at some point you're gonna exceed that, and that's gonna trigger you into a commercial system.
yes, yep, and.
And so that might be your limit.
Well, and that's is, you either do single tower or you do a kilowatt limit, and is 100 where you wanna be? Or do you wanna move it down to 50 so we align with solar?
Or maybe the total height, 135 feet is what you're allowed, can be 135, or 67.5, or 43s.
Not warm enough for that one.
I don't think you wanna go down that road.
That's the
Yeah,
slide rule,
that's
that's the
on-
slide rule zoning.
I think it comes down to when do you become a commercial?
720?
You know, that's, it's, at what point does it trigger to become a commercial, you know? And that's the thing,
And WAPA, views that as 50,
yeah.
because they're the ones that require you to sell.
So
50.
50 is how many of those personal single towers?
2 or 3.
Okay,
But 50 kW is also a lot of power. Most homes use about unless you're doing welding and all this other stuff, but your average home, even in the country, is gonna be 1,000, 1,500 kilowatt hours a month. You know, a 12 kW, 14 kW solar or wind is gonna be plenty for that. So when you start making 4 times more than what your on-site consumption is, you're not even really net metering anymore, you're exporting. And the way the economics are, here you put up all that kind of capacity, even for $2 a watt, you're only getting paid a
that's it, yeah.
pittance. You don't wanna be exporting. You do not wanna be in that business unless you got megawatts to work with.
Because see, that's what I'm struggling with, is the fact that at what point does it not, it doesn't even make sense to put up that many towers.
No. The only reason it makes sense to put up a tower at all at this point is if you have winter loads that you want to address. Because of the seasonality between solar and wind, because solar is 20% of what a wind turbine costs anymore. Used to be the other way.
Yeah.
You know, it flipped. Solar used to be $5 a watt just for the panel.
Lauren, if you could say, if you look at taking government out of this yoke, what sense does it make to put up any wind tower?
Amen.
Oh, come on now.
Because, I mean, I'm just thinking of our, our neighbor to the east. If they put up one solar, not solar, but wind tower, 2, 3, but then when you start hitting that, you know what I mean? I mean, that's the thing.
I've never heard.
That's
of
what I
that.
mean. I was gonna ask
I've
you the
never
other
heard
question
of it.
is, have you-
I mean, in California, when in the Tahachi
But
Pass
that's
or
the
whatever.
Tehachapi, but that's a commercial system, that's a
Right,
Yeah.
because they
commercial
had-
farm,
they-
so.
I don't know how many hundreds, but they only had the technology. Nowadays, there's no multiple. I don't
No.
even know of 2. I've never even heard of 2.
So I'm sensing that the word single probably doesn't need to be incorporated anywhere. We need to focus on our maximum KW.
I think our
And right now
100
it's a-
KW, I think our 100 KW is plenty limit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is plenty limit like a good limit or too much limit by the word
Well,
plenty?
Think about this, our solar was. well,
50.
50.
50.
And I think we could go down to 50, just simply because that's where all the power selling
That's your
requirements
unit, yeah.
start and everything that aligns with everything that also aligns with solar.
Okay, so
And so-
anything over 50 would be in the next section, which is commercial.
Yeah,
I think so.
Do we have some consensus?
That would be
there?
another limit on the numbers, right, 50.
Okay, so I'm gonna cross off the 100, I'm gonna circle a 50 and cross off the single. And when I get home, I'm gonna understand all of these notes. Okay. So I think 1 and then let's, 2, we're okay with the wording in 2, which is no part of the wind system structure may be sited closer to property lines and or right-of-ways than 1.1 times the height of the wind turbine.
Yep.
Okay, and so there we're crossing out the word structure,
Yes.
and that was in 2603-2A.
Yes.
Okay, so let's turn the page. So now, with our discussion at the beginning, we're just gonna march through, and I shouldn't say march, that implies we're just going to give it a little glance. Let's go through 3 through 12.
Are we still, I was gonna go back to
Oh, yeah.
3C, the tower. Are we gonna require fencing around?
Well, that's where we're at now, we're on 3. So we're
Oh,
gonna
okay.
start
I
talking-
must have mine done differently. Mine's, because I'm still on the same page. Okay, sorry.
Okay, oh, yeah,
Um,
I might have an old.
Okay, that's fine.
I would propose, I'm gonna probably be repeating myself here, but a lot of these are outdated. On 3 access, I think that whole thing should go away, because the tower is the climbing apparatus. I think this refers to a commercial wind turbine that has a pipe and there's a ladder. And you don't want just anybody climbing up a wind turbine ladder, just like a fire escape or anything else, a water tower. But that's not what this is. This doesn't even have applicability to a small wind
So the
turbine.
ladder is on the pole or whatever?
The pole is the ladder.
It is,
Anything
okay.
going over, some at 80, but in a lot of cases, if it's a pole, you're gonna be able to lower it one way
Oh,
or
gotcha.
another, whether it's guide or not guide.
Oh, yeah.
If it's a lattice tower, the tower is the climb, is what you climb on.
So do they do anything to prevent little kids from climbing the tower? Are there concerns with that, or is that just viewed as, again,
You
it's kinda
can't- well,
like a
kids-
swimming pool? If you have a swimming pool, you should probably put a fence around it.
Well, kids today, I mean, how do you climb like this, you know?
well,
No, seriously.
but seriously, I think my concern would be like, if you have a tower like this out in the ag zone and it's rural, there's not a lot of people around. I don't know, I had young sons who have done dumber things.
Indeed. So if you've got a ladder that's readily available, you should have some cover over it if you can't do something better than that.
Well, you could say that if a climbing, or just a fence or something, if it's provided, but small wind turbines don't have ladders, that would double the cost of the tower. to run a ladder up a pole or something. No, nobody climbs the poles, they bring it down. If it's a lattice, they climb up on the lattice. I've never, in the wind turbine stuff that I've worked with, I haven't seen, on the small side, access prohibitions, you know, in play. Could be. It's kind of burdensome though for a small wind turbine owner.
I think item C in that number 3 access kind of covers this. It says enclosure of the tower by a fence at least 6 feet high with locking portals when climbing apparatus is less than 8 feet from the ground. So in the case of your tipping towers, there is no climbing apparatus.
No.
But in the case of the towers that have lattice work,
Yeah.
that is the climbing apparatus. So those would have to have a fence around them. So I think item C, as it is currently written, would seem to answer everyone's objections so far.
So you're saying we could maybe delete A and B and just focus on C?
Seems like it.
Robert?
That makes sense because a pole, a lot of these 40, 60, 80 footers are guide and you can lower them, you know, with the little crank, well, not on the up, take up, but on the drop down, just a battery powered drill. And you can't have a fence because it goes flat to the ground. Yeah, no, that would make sense with a lattice tower. The lattice tower is the ladder and it is open and accessible. That tower is not gonna be moving. If that tower moving, it's coming down uncontrolled.
Right, yeah.
So,
I've had kids like Ryan's, and they'll find a way.
I was just gonna say, you're adding cost to this with a 6-foot-high fence. If the kid, if your boys, they know how to jump over a 6-foot
Oh, I know.
fence.
But
And that's what I'm
it is
saying.
about, you never can make things perfectly secure.
Right, exactly.
It's all about making enough obstacle to not make it too easy.
Jerry,
If you
would
make
you-
it too easy, you're gonna have problems.
Would the county have a liability, if the standard of these wind farms around the country is to have a lockable device and we don't require it? Somebody climbs up and falls?
Imagine that.
I can't.
Yeah.
can imagine
Some
someone
counties
trying.
don't have any requirements at all.
Right.
I mean, Davidson County, in some areas, you need a CUP, but they have no requirements,
I
nothing.
mean, that's why we took swimming pools out too, and there was that argument about fences or not fences and things, and we just said, that's their personal responsibility, we really don't wanna get in the middle of that.
And going back to that again, is like, I think about, over in Nebraska, my family has a 100-foot radio tower. Well, it's not, there's no 6-foot fence around it, and you climb on the lattice. But it is in a fenced off parcel that is behind a fence, barbed wire fence. So that does limit access as well, even though it's not fenced directly around the tower.
Who out of us touched electric fences all the time when we were little?
I made
All
lights.
the time?
Once. Once.
At least once.
Yeah. And we were coerced by Big Brother.
What's your hand?
And so I think there needs to be something to say, access, some type of limitation of access, particularly in the country, it's like where these things could be out largely unmonitored. And I don't know if how do we write that so that maybe it doesn't have to be a 6-foot fence directly around the thing, but if the parcel is well secured, it's okay if it's way out in the middle of the parcel that's well secured. But if it's something where easily drive up along the side of the road, you definitely need a fence around it.
What does a 6-foot fence cost to do? $100? $200?
Oh, I bet you probably in today's prices to go around a tower,
Yeah.
$1,000.
Yeah, well, we just got a 10x10 dog kennel that's 6 foot high, and that was 1,000. The chain link is probably 700, 800, 700. So it's
And that's
kinda
kinda
sitting there,
thinking-
and that's just sitting there. That's no
Yeah.
poles. It's not attachment.
Compared to the cost of the rest of the system, a fence doesn't seem to me like it's that
Well, lattice
burdensome.
tower. Lattice tower with a 10 kW Berge turbine on it, you're probably looking $60,000.
At least.
So,
You've had
that's
enough.
not, I mean, if the tower is climbable, and I've seen a lot of cell towers that do have vents at the base, but they're typically accompanied by like a backup generator, a communications 8x8 shed, you know, other valuables in there, so I don't know, is that for theft or is that for idiots climbing? I don't, you know, you don't know. But it's I think it's reasonable to keep 3C.
Okay,
Maybe not specify the 6 foot, but a fence and anti-climb provisions of some sort, maybe non-specific.
okay.
There was a mention earlier about legal consideration and liability for the county, since we're passing the rules or making suggestions for the rules here. And there have been precedents where governmental bodies have been held liable, or individuals have been held liable, and it gets into a real gray area who's really responsible there. So I think we need to proceed with real caution here and be conservative in terms of what we do and try to cover all the bases, given the relative ratio of the cost of a fence versus the total cost of the system. It's minuscule.
In this case, yeah, I would agree. But the utility interconnection application is gonna require, that you show insurance for the renewable energy system. And in this case, it'd be homeowners insurance. But I just saw one today from Mid-American Energy, and they require a statement of insurance on the application.
Who checks on it?
Well, you have to submit it with the application.
Yeah, what, and then 10 years later, who checks on it? Nobody. Anyway,
You wanna be in the insurance checking business, do you?
All right, so I think maybe we've discussed 3 enough. I think we've got a general idea that we need something in there. The planning commission can certainly play with the wording a little bit there if we wanna figure out some way to, you know, ensure there's something there to prevent access, unwarranted access, so. Next one is noise, and currently,
So,
sir,
sorry.
yes.
So are we leaving it as it is for right here then, to advance it on?
I think we had talked about deleting A and B and
Yeah,
keeping
right,
C.
yeah, C.
Yep.
Yes, okay.
Yep, and so let's move on to 4, and there's A and B there. And A, small wind energy systems shall not exceed 55 decibels measured at the closest point on the closest property line from the base of the system. So our solar ordinance we just wrote is 50. If you looked at some of the other counties that
50 dBA
DBA,
for solar?
for the noise of the buzzing and stuff.
Okay.
So, so if you look at some of the other counties, they range anywhere from 45. There's several 45s. There's a couple 50s. Did I see 155 in here somewhere? I thought it had been. No, I'm not seeing it. Oh, there's a 65 in Clay County for commercial. And for small in Clay County, it's 50 at the property line. So.
Does anybody know what that sounds like?
I was just gonna look that up.
Is there an equivalent sound that we can adjust, judge what 50 decibels is?
Well, in terms of decibels, the Bonham County has a 45 decibel limit at the door of a house, which is adjoining a wind tower, and basically, they describe the 45 decibels as a low-grade conversation at the door, so if somebody was outside your door talking quietly, you couldn't hear them.
So like 30 dBA is a whisper, 40 is light rain, 50 is a quiet office, and then 60 would be normal conversation. 70 would be a toilet flushing.
So for the reference here, this conversation has been running between 45 to 55.
Is that without my mic?
Yeah.
Sure, you know yours is off, right?
Yeah, cause we can only have so many on, so I'm sharing my gene here.
Yeah.
So what did you say, Sherry, 60? What's the highest you said?
There was a
45 to
60,
65.
a commercial requirement in Clay County is 65, but the residential in Clay is 50 at the property line.
What was the rationale for 50 for the solar? So are we looking at any consistency, or isn't that a consideration?
With solar, the only concern there is that if you have a poor conversion system attached to it, it can create buzzing and noise. There could be electronic noise. And if that's placed close to a property line, close to another person's property, it could be an annoyance. And so it just kind of protects you from, bad design.
Thank you.
Well, and when you say 45 compared to these other compared to the other comparisons that we've talked about, you're not talking about something that's 60 feet away or 70 feet away or over, were we measuring from the base of the tower?
That's what this is measured at the
The base of
closest
the
point
system.
on the closest property at the base of the system. So if you're 1.1 times from the property line, at that property line, that your noise needs to
Oh,
be,
closest from the base of the system, okay.
that you need
So
to be
it's-
55
It's a
or
little
less.
bit kicked out, so it's a little bit more than the height of the tower away,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, that's, you should have some reduction in that. I think 55 is fine.
I think you're gonna be fine at 55. You're gonna have a pretty noisy tower to exceed that at 150 feet away.
Yes.
I'd be fine with 45
hear it.
for
Mhm.
everything. If we've got 50 on solar, let's say 50 for everything. Big, little, solar, wind.
Well, and it's kinda, consistency is a good thing. I mean, there's a reason I suppose.
So for
we
something
chose
like
50.
that, for something like that, consistency supersedes all the different stuff. That standard needs to be met, no matter what, no matter where.
So if it's 50 at the property line, then it's certainly less at the residence beyond the property line.
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
Everybody good with going to 50?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
so 4A is 50, and I'm assuming we're okay with the B part, the noise level may be exceeded during
Yeah.
short-term events, which, if it's really howling out, you're not gonna hear anything but the storm, but, so that's DBA. So the next is approved wind turbines. So I think this part you're talking is really outdated probably,
That doesn't even exist anymore.
you know, and
I mean,
really.
for some there's some models that are there, but it's not a requirement in the industry.
You know, and later on, we have requirements that it's gotta meet a national electric code, building and zoning code.
Yeah, it's 5, 6, 7, and 8, I would recommend to delete. Because the National Electric Code is gonna be enforced by the state inspector. I don't think the county should get involved with that.
Do we need to have anything in there that says you just can't go stick a pole in the ground and put your own little thing up there? I mean, are we concerned about that? Do we need to have something in there that said it's a marketable or it's a legitimate product? And I'm sure I can probably find something in a different ordinance to steal.
Well, here's the downside. If you buy a good turbine, it's gonna be there. If you buy a piece of junk, in the winds that we have, it's gonna be gone in a year. That's the downsides to the buyer. If they buy junk, if they buy cheap stuff, it's gonna be destroyed in short order.
So what are our thoughts on the suggestion to eliminate 5, 6, 7, and 8?
Number 7, about FAA regulations, how can you eliminate that? Federal Aviation Administration regulations, you
Yeah.
have to meet those.
Sure, I mean, but that would mean trees. I mean, I have trees, I'm by the airport, I have trees taller than what my turbine would be. 135 feet is tree height. So you can leave that in there, but the chance that a small wind turbine is gonna hit that is slim to none.
We do have some property, I know, that falls on the, you know, you live on the side of the airport. The either ends of those airports, I know they demolished some buildings and took out a bunch of trees because they couldn't have them.
Right.
You know, so maybe that was put in there if you own that property.
I mean, you can,
Cover that.
these laws apply whether, you know, the county says or not.
That is
The county's
true.
not gonna enforce them. It's not the county's responsibility to educate people
Mhm.
that you can't put up a pole in front of a takeoff strip.
Maybe
That is true, I'm sure you'd have to knock
You
on their
can't
front
say
door.
stupid.
I think we can probably, I think it probably is probably safe to keep 6, 7, 8. 6, 7, and 8. 5, I think, is outdated and might be able to be eliminated, I think.
So, let's start with 5. Would everybody be okay with just removing 5?
Because I feel like whatever things 5 is providing is already provided within 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, 5 is very limiting and redundant. Those standards are not required by the industry. They may or may not be certified. That doesn't mean they're a good tower or not. So 5 is just way outdated. 6, now, applications for a small wind energy conversion shall be accompanied by a standing drawing, blah, 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 required setbacks. The utility court requires that in their application. So this is just redundant.
It is redundant, but I feel like it's good to have the same
Okay.
redundancy here.
So
Okay.
that's,
You know,
Redundancy
Now,
is
the
good.
engineering on, I can live with. B, the engineering analysis is over the top. Professional engineer, licensed, certified in the state, wet stamp, I mean, that's insanity. Now, you'll get, on a certified system, like you buy an ARE tower, you know, it's certified for anywhere, but you don't have to have an engineer with the red ink stamping a drawing, that's expensive. And these are still small systems we're talking about.
I agree with that. Like, I don't think we should be requiring, especially for like a standardized system,
Right.
not requiring a PE stamp would be
Right.
a fresh PE stamp on something that's
You got a
been
guy
already
trying to,
designed.
yeah,
It's already certified.
Yeah.
so can I suggest in that first one, A, it says applications for small wind energy conversion systems shall be accompanied by standard, and insert the word manufacturer's drawings of the wind turbine. That means somebody manufactured it. We're not saying it has to be stamped with a
but
P.
for this purpose. For this purpose, cause the forces, the longitudinal forces on a wind turbine are different than if you're putting up, say, a cell tower or something else that doesn't have torque on blades. It's a different whole set of forces, so as long as it's any available drawings and information that references that this tower was made for wind turbine. It's not a guy slamming irrigation pipes together with some barbed wire, you know? It was made to do this. Cause
Okay.
not all ARE towers, some are meant for temporary cell phone, applications, and they'll limit the tower size that you can put on it. Because of those, you can put all this, or you can go 1 kW on a wind turbine.
Okay, so we can, the planning commission can get that language all squared away to make sure. So we would then be okay, if that was in there, with B and C being deleted. Is that, am I right on that, or everybody's reading?
Or, I don't know if it has to be deleted or is part of that kind of rework by the planning commission.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
kind of merge it together, don't require the PE stamp.
Doesn't need a PE stamp, but we do wanna see the engineering analysis. We do wanna see engineered towers.
Correct,
Yeah, you can probably merge that just into one paragraph.
engineered towers, okay, we'll get that done.
Sure, once you come up with the draft, you'll probably have it, the parts that we would be eliminating, you'd have those still in there so that if somebody's looking at the
Parentheses or
commission,
something.
Yep,
then they can see, oh,
yep, that's
they
how it
can
has to,
discuss it, yeah.
Yeah.
yep, that's how it has to be
So
written.
they'll have an opportunity to react to what may be eliminated.
Correct,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
What we generally do, Mike, is, yeah, we strike, you can still read the words, we
Yeah.
strike the sentences, and then if we add things, we put them in red as new words that are going into it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so A and B all together. All right, so the next one is 7, compliance with FAA. Are we okay with the wording there and just leave it in there? I mean, really, I mean, you can say, I'm not in a fly zone, or whatever it is. I,
135 feet, unless you're on the airport fence, is not gonna trigger, but yeah, I mean, you can leave it in, I guess there's no prize for,
Doesn't really
you know, making
I think you
sure
leave
it's
it in.
possible.
You-
If you have somebody at the end of the airport, it's probably a good idea to have this in place,
mhm.
even though it seems like common sense.
Yeah,
As many have said here, a lot don't use their common sense.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt to leave it in, I think it's worded
It's a
okay.
reminder that they need to contact them or read the regulations.
well, some people don't even think about it,
Mhm.
That's
Right.
right.
you know?
Right.
You just-
I agree with Jane.
That's true, okay.
Okay, so number 8 is the compliance with the National Electric Code. So conversion, it shall be accompanied by a line drawing of the electrical components in sufficient detail to allow for a determination that the manner of installation conforms to the National Electric Code.
Okay, 2 things here. National Electric Code, what year? They update this thing like every other year, it seems. You know, so right there, you're already kinda outdated because you don't know which code you would be even be referring to. You cannot tell if a system is gonna pass an electrical inspection by a line diagram. You have to be there and see it. And the line diagram is required by the utility in the application.
So again, it's redundant, but again, I think this is a redundancy that we'll have here. We'd wanna have the line diagram,
Well, I
knowing
would-
that they
I
do
would-
have it there, and
Well,
those things are in place.
is anybody in the county qualified or experienced to
No.
make sense of that?
But it's part of what you keep with the application as part of the packet, like you can go back to reference
Well,
it.
you could say if someone does, not that I've ever done this, but there's a term out there called gorilla net metering. And it's, I would get Sherry's itches. But it's maybe getting a permit or doing something without a permit that is not kosher with the electric. And if you did have a record of how it was supposed to be installed, you can check if it was changed. I mean, that would potentially have some value. But I would take, if you wanted to keep that, it would just be the same line diagram I'm gonna send to Northwestern or
Exactly,
whoever.
it is, yeah.
But I would take the NEC language out of there.
Why
No.
wouldn't you just say
I
the
would-
How
current
about the
National
current-
Electric Code?
Current,
I would,
doesn't
I would,
mean anything.
Current
I would leave
national.
it, I would still leave the NEC in there, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you're always, it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're building a house or a building or anything, you're always stuck to that NEC code. And I agree with you, it changes constantly, it's a big headache, and you're never knowing
Well,
if you're
it's
gonna
just-
pass unless you actually get the inspector there and pass you. That's the only way you know you
And that
pass, so.
happens, and that's
But
the real
again,
thing.
this is
So-
the idea, again, it's kinda just saying, that's what our standard is NEC.
Yeah.
We are not the experts on the standard, and we're not the judgment on the standard. We're deferring to the NEC.
Like the FAA, I guess, just
Yeah.
a reference to it, okay.
So as the applicant, I would read that, and if the word current National Electric Code was what it said, I would say, oh, well, the dude I'm buying this from gave me this line drawing, and I'm gonna attach it to my application.
Yep.
Right,
So, and I had to attach it to my application to BY, because I'm hooking into them.
well,
So-
but when you have, and that's okay, but when you say a line drawing of the electrical components in sufficient detail to allow for determination that the manner of installation conforms to NEC, how do you do that? I've done many line drawings for applications for interconnection, But how can you look at a line drawing and determine if it's gonna pass a test, pass an inspection? You gotta look at every connector, every,
Yeah, you can't, you cannot.
so I say, this is all like lawyer gobbledygook. I think.
You cannot, exactly that, you can't do that from a line drawing.
No.
But the point is that this is exactly showing that you've got the steps that you are going to be compliant with it. We're not here to enforce compliance with the NEC code.
Right,
We're seeing that we have the little check marks in here showing that they are going to be compliant, and that's a whole nother department's job, not our job.
well, I guess,
We just wanna be able to say that, okay, this is in that packet, and they have checked off that mark, you know?
okay.
And that they have thought through that part.
The only problem I have a problem with in that discussion is insufficient detail. 'Cause I can show you a line drawing
Yeah.
on the
It-
driveway
That's
report
that's
right
a,
now.
what is sufficient detail?
It's not possible.
That's
And
where the
again, we
lawyers
could
make
maybe-
a lot of money.
We could maybe clarify that up to be a little simpler, that, yeah, the fact is that we're not here to actually judge whether
Line drawing of
it's
electrical
detail
components.
enough, but we want to be able to say that we have that for reference.
Well,
Um,
can we say permit applications for the conversion system shall be accompanied by a line drawing of the electrical components, and the system will be installed according to the current National Electric Code?
Current,
That would be right.
current.
Okay,
yeah.
Would that
current,
be
That
current
would
is
be
good.
good, yes.
Current.
So, and the system will be installed according to current NEC?
You a lawyer?
You
I
could,
am in my second job.
you could, say most current.
Well,
I think
not
current-
everybody
just
uses the
saying
most
current.
But, I mean, yeah, I get that.
Well, I can look
Permit
around,
applications for
around for
small
other
shall be-
people and how they
Yeah.
worded this, cause I know there's other counties out there that have these types of requirements, and maybe they worded it better than is worded here.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So I think
I'll include
everybody-
that also.
Everybody agrees something needs to be in here, we're not exactly sure how we need to state it.
And the
Yeah.
the B is also not, I don't think, the
I'm
B is
not-
is not reality either, the way it's written, because first, it's not analysis, it's a line diagram, and the line diagram's gonna be specific to the site, because it's gonna show the electrical components that may be outside the system. Sometimes manufacturers, if you buy complete systems.
I don't like the line B, just simply because it makes it sounds like there's some obligation of the manufacturer to
Right,
provide this.
which may or may
It
not
it may or may
exist.
not be the case.
Yeah.
I think it just strike that B.
All right, so we will look a little bit more into that. Let's go to 9, utility notification. So nothing shall be installed until evidence has been given that the utility company has been informed of the intent to install an interconnected generator. Off-grid systems shall be exempt from this requirement. Is there really anything we need to change there?
I don't think so.
I mean,
I
'cause
don't-
they do need to notify them.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I just, and maybe this is already done. So let's say they call them or inform them. Do they need any documentation back that they did inform? And I'm just raising that question. How do you know that they informed them?
Well, so what we did with solar is we reorganized everything. So we had all these requirements, and then we had a little thing that says, for the CUP application, you need to bring these things in.
Okay, just.
Check,
so-
check, check, check.
yeah, just so-
And on that was that, so the planning commission will probably look at creating a checklist to say,
Fine.
this is the paperwork you need to submit, but that is a good point. So do we think we need any changes to 9? I thought it was worded
Yeah,
pretty
I think
decent.
Mine
I
looks
think it's
okay.
Okay, so 9's okay. 10, warning information related to the max power output, nominal voltage, max current, and emergency shutdown procedures shall be posted near the base of the tower. I mean, if they're posted there and I walk up to them, do you really want me trying to figure out how to do that?
The utility has specific requirements on shutoffs.
Okay,
So they're gonna require it to be there. We used to call it the Frankenstein switch. But there needs to be especially if it's a certain distance from the home or whatever, they're gonna want a shut off at the closest possible place to the tower, which is at the tower. solar may penetrate into the building, like if it's on the roof, it'll come into the building, it's not outside. But they'll still require an outside switch that the utility worker can walk up to and go click if there's an outage. That's the thought behind that. So they're already gonna require that.
So now we have these smart meters. I mean, can they just shut the meter off?
No.
They're
Say,
they're
that
still
doesn't
gonna
work
want,
that way.
they're still gonna want a physical
They want
shut off.
yeah, they're gonna want the physical throw switch. It's kind of with the IEEE regulations and the certifications that this equipment has to go through. If the grid goes down, the equipment's off. The equipment's certified to do that. So the Frankenstein switch is redundant, but, you know, they're still gonna require it because they can.
And that's behind the fence.
That would be, behind the fence.
So is this worded properly? I mean, 10 says warning information.
I think it's worded properly, and again, it's a bit of redundancy because the utility's probably gonna require some of this too, but, again, it's, redundancy's good here, and I think it's worded properly.
Okay,
Yeah,
good with that? Do we need
yeah,
to
it's a little,
massage it a little?
it doesn't cost you any money. I mean, it's not burdensome in the fact that I gotta go,
You know, and
you know,
sometimes,
add more expense or anything. It's just a sign. You could write some Sharpie on there that it's 200 volts, don't touch the dummy. In case
don't
you're
put your
wondering.
finger in there. All right, we've got 2 left, so site reclamation. So it talks about, let's see, dismantling it, remove from the site all the towers, the turbines, et cetera, within 120 days upon notification from the county. If deemed appropriate, the county may stipulate through this conditional use that the small WEX shall be removed at the owner's expense upon the rezoning of the subject property to a zoning classification in which it's not allowed.
And
Well,
I think that should be done, cause again, yeah, you have an ag property, you have a 135-foot tower, suddenly it's being turned into residential lots, and you're going to rezone that into residential, then that tower needs to come down.
Well, technically, you would be the one rezoning it, cause it's your property.
It is, yeah.
For a different use.
Early. I think especially if there's obvious signs of disrepair, then it becomes dangerous and it needs to come down. I have little trouble with, is no longer able to operate or upon earlier termination of operation of the small WEX. I don't understand what that means. Upon earlier termination of operation of the small WEX. Not sure what it's going for here, but I have, there's always one in the crowd, right? So, my farm in Nebraska, I had a 60-foot collapsible turbine. Place was burned to the ground. Miraculously, the wind turbine survived, and it's there, but it's gonna be a while before I'm able to do anything with it. It's not damaged, it's not doing anything different. And the same way with any kind of repair, if a repair was required, in my case, all the electronics got destroyed, that has to be replaced. But if you have a, I think as long as the disrepair or damage, that should be the criteria, not the fact, not that you can tell if it's working or not. But if it's not operating, then that doesn't mean it's a safety hazard. Because it could take a while to find a tower climber. I know in those 10K Berge lattice towers, there's only so many crazy people out there that climb wind turbine towers and stuff and do those kind of repairs, and they're hard to get, takes a while. So as long as the standard is based on, not on operation, but on safety, I think that's appropriate, that they should have to take it down.
Yeah, I think the spirit of this is that we don't have a tower out there that's just, that's gone into disuse and falling into disrepair.
Like in California,
And
now,
just
now
hanging out
nobody
there.
wants to do nothing with it.
And, you know, if it's just not being used at the current time is not a reason to take it down.
Right, that's the only
So-
thing I would caution on.
If you just take out the word earlier from line 4, then it actually makes sense.
Do anything with them in California.
They just left them, the people are long gone. nobody wants to take responsibility now.
The paragraph is written in a sort of a backwards way as it currently sits, but I think that means that that 120 days on the bottom, in the last line, is the time frame.
It's a time frame from a county notification, so the county would have to notify that you need to take the tower down.
Right.
And then you have 120 days.
That's what I understand. And so if you just take out the word earlier, then the whole paragraph makes sense.
I think the language, seems like it was cut and paste from a commercial turbine paragraph. Because transformers, overhead cables, underground, I mean, this is not stuff you have with small wind turbines.
Still, if they're not there, then they don't have to be removed.
Okay. I think for safety reasons, obviously, the county should be able to take them, have them removed. But does that mean we go around and, you think we could find some windmill towers in disrepair that have been there since 1937?
I mean, that's,
Mhm.
I'm sitting here thinking this is on my property. You know, this is my property in Ag Zone. And, you know, I think of the, windmill towers, windmills that are, sitting out there that people actually take pictures of now because they're so picturesque, but.
120 years old.
Right, exactly, but, what I'm sitting here thinking is that it's on my property, and how many other things, I can go around the county and I can tell you, silos that are in disrepair. I mean, what else do we in the county require it to be decommissioned? You know what I mean?
That's
Are-
true,
are
I
we-
mean-
Or do we have silos that are decommissioned, grain bins,
Rotten
what-
trees.
Right, exactly. So that's the thing that I am sitting here wrestling with, is the fact that this is on my property. And, and then the other thing too is, who's gonna go around the county making sure these is Gary gonna, take it once a month, you know what I mean? Or are you gonna wait till a neighbor complains, or,
It's the typical thing, yeah, we require that they sign a complaint but it's all in the eye of the beholder.
Right.
Some people, they see one thing like that, like you said, the tower, an old windmill or something, they think, man, this is cool, I wanna take a picture of it. And then the rest of them go, well, that thing's ready to fall down, I want it off the property.
in the solar, did we put anything in there when you have your own, your own personal solar? If it comes in disrepair, they have to take it down.
We didn't have any regulations under 50 kilowatts.
Right.
did we? Well, I got it right here.
Yeah, I do too.
So,
But that's what I'm just saying. Do we require anything else in our zoning where if it comes in disrepair, if it's on your property, that Gary's gonna come around and tell, give you a notice? Knock, knock, knock.
So you're thinking that we could maybe strike all of A?
I'm just saying, it's on my property. It's my responsibility, kind of going back to the fencing.
Well,
You know,
I would, and I agree, for ag zone, for sure,
Right.
because there's space. But some of these, we've allowed some rooftop wind turbines in, high-density residential areas. So if you have something in disrepair in close quarters, parts can go flying.
Right, and that's, and that don't we require, what didn't we say we're requiring a CUP, right? If it's in a smaller,
yep.
I think that's the thing. If you don't require a CUP, but yet you turn around and Gary's gonna get after you for having a disrepair, you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Well,
Well,
the other
yep.
issue there that everybody always forgets about too is then you gotta prove in court that it's a nuisance or whatever, so.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen very easily.
So all the things we're talking about apply to the residential wind,
Yep.
All the little tiny rooftops, everything, and then the ag, less than 50 kilowatts. So, and we did in the solar, anything over 50 kilowatts requires things to be decommissioned. Because we considered those commercial, but we did not have any, so I have rooftop solar, and if it all gets damaged with hail tomorrow, there's no requirement for me to move them. But there's no requirement, if it wasn't there, for me to fix my shingles either. So there's kind of a, but one difference is, nobody's gonna get hurt from my solar panels having hail damage.
Yep.
You know, whereas a wind tower, if it had 2.5 blades left and it was just plunking along and throws something, that could go beyond, you know, so there is there's a
Right.
slight difference there, just because of the moving parts.
Well, the ag zone's got the 1.1. If something happens, it's probably not
If it
gonna throw more
fell
than
over it,
1.1.
That's why you have that
I've
setback.
I've had some self-destruct in the wind, when the guy wire popped and it came up into the blades and there was some shredding, I've been hit with ice off the blades, but that's all pretty much under the turbine. I think what they're going after here is the safety aspect of it, and I think maybe only applying it to the residential, applications might be appropriate.
If
Maybe
we,
simplifying it and saying if something's bumping, if something's in obvious disrepair, it needs to get fixed or come down.
So for all other zones, for all zones other than ag.
right,
Yeah,
yeah.
cause it's primarily safety consideration, I think.
So you put some
And
words.
if you actually put it in there that it's an obvious disrepair and possible safety issue, then yes, then we will do something.
And the
We can
neighbor
do
would
something.
hear it, cause you could hear it, like,
Yeah.
you know, you hear something's off, you get an ear for it. If the guy's living next to, you know, and it changes, or, you know, you'll know something, and then it would be a safety issue, I think.
So to go on and require the generators, the transformers, all the cables, underground included, foundations, buildings, ancillary equipment, you're requiring that on a private system to all be removed.
Well, those terms came out of a commercial paragraph.
Well, that's my point, should
Yeah.
they still be here, because I have property where there was a grain bin there 50 years ago, I know, cause the concrete's still there.
Mhm.
And the old well is there, and the septic's there. I mean, we've got things covered so kids don't fall in, the cisterns. You know, so how much of that do you require, or do you require just the portion that could potentially hurt someone to be removed? It should be decommissioned,
Yeah.
so it's a safe going forward.
Cause it, you know, small wind turbine, even at 120, no, I don't know about 120 feet, but at least at 80 feet, a guide pole wind turbine has no base. It's on the ground. It's just got there's no foundation even there, so I think there's some extra words and stuff in here. I think it just needs to be streamlined. Safety, visual disrepair, safety, residential district, in my opinion.
So just put a period after from the site and strike the rest?
Where are you at, Gary?
Yeah,
I'm catching up.
Just put a
dismantle and
period
remove,
from-
you know.
From the site on line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5.
Okay,
Just put a period after from the site and strike the rest.
strike all
Yeah.
towers, turbines, generators, etc.
Oh, okay.
Shall have the obligation of the period so expensive to dismantle and remove.
Or repair.
I think we need to include tower, to
Certainly.
remove
Yeah.
the tower,
I think, yeah, towers, generators,
essentially, so to dismantle and remove the tower, or all towers is fine, I mean, you can leave all in there.
Sure.
Tower and generator components.
Within 120 days upon notification of the county, so keep that last part in there too,
Right.
so there's still the time frame.
And the owner would still have the opportunity to effect repairs to avoid
Right.
Yeah, this would be only, I mean, the county goes out and says, hey, that's not looking good, and he says, well, I've got my timeline to fix it. The county says, well, that's fine, and if it's not fixed in that timeline, then proceedings would,
Yeah.
would begin.
Okay.
Because it will be, a complaint from a neighbor that'll say something. So is B fine then? We agreed that if they rezoned their property, that they would need to meet the new zoning.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think B is
I think
fine.
everybody's okay with B. All right, 12, federal and state requirements. All WECs shall meet or exceed standards and regulations of the FAA and South Dakota statutes and any other agency of federal or state government with the authority to regulate. We've already had the FAA.
There's nothing in the statute,
Yeah, I think almost 12 seems
just a catch-all.
a catch-all, and it could just almost be eliminated.
I would be okay with that. Okay, so that kind of closes out small wind, so we have decided that applies to anything 50 kilowatts or less. And most everything needs a CUP except for in the ag zone, as long as you're less than the height requirements we put on. Anything else that we need to put in there? I'll have to go and refer to some of those other zones to see if there's, from just a cursory memory, I can't think of anything else they had in there that we don't. But I can check that.
One differentiates the noise level of property line versus noise at nearest habitable dwelling. I don't know,
Yeah.
it's 50 and 60, I don't know that it makes any difference.
You know, the one thing about having it at the property line, then your neighbor knows what it's supposed to be in case they build close to that property line. So when you, like, if you put in a wind tower and you have, nobody is living in the area, and then they do move in, because that's a good place to build their home on their property, they would know that property line, this is the limit already. And they're moving in next to it, so you could say, well, you moved in next to it, live with it, but that is one thing you could say, at least you knew the property line was going to be that. So that is a plus for having it be the property line versus just a residence.
Yeah, the person building the tower, they have control over the property line. You know, it's like, this is
Right.
solid requirement. Like, if you start saying to to the nearest resident, suddenly like someone builds something new over here, and oh no, now your requirements just changed on your tower, that's,
Yeah,
That's
you
not
couldn't
like-
do that.
yeah.
You couldn't do that, but, it may minimize some of those contentious things after
Mhm.
the fact. So that is one reason I do like the property line.
And if you have a reasonable limit at the property line, it's only gonna be
Less,
better.
Less.
less after
Yes,
that,
yeah.
so, you know, if you could do that. So we are about 5:35, we have two choices, we can start on large, or we can call it good today and hit section 2604 at our next meeting, which would be you're not gonna be here?
Oh, I will, yes.
You will be
I have a
here.
comment though before you start.
Oh, yeah, so,
Yes.
yeah,
I'd be open to start fresh on
Mm.
the large
okay,
size, but that's one opinion.
okay, and
I
sometimes.
agree with Mike. Just to sort of set the stage for this, though, again, what we've been doing up until now is we've been establishing the rules of the game for residents who are property owners in Yankton County. And I think, based on what we've agreed on, it seems like it's a pretty good set of rules. However, when we begin to consider large commercial wind energy conversion systems, I believe that we have absolutely no obligation whatsoever to any corporate entity outside Yankton County to accommodate their interest. And I think that has to be established right up front so that we all know that that's the dividing line here. The dividing line is that up until now, we've been talking about what residents of Yankton County who are landowners can and cannot do on their own property. From now on, we're going to be talking about what large corporations might want to do. And I think we've heard a lot of discussion and presentations on various issues that, you know, about these large commercial systems, and I think, you know, they fall into various categories. A lot of them are emotional. Some of them are political. Some of them seem to have concerns about how big corporations make money. When you get to the end of the day, what it's really going to be about is it's a financial decision for the county whether or not to allow these things. Now, yesterday I drove up to Olivet in Hutchinson County, and first of all, what a great group of people in their county courthouse. They are so professional and accommodating and willing to help. I received from them actual tax receipts for the county, for the townships, and for the schools from the wind turbine systems that are in their county now. So we have a track record. When they first started, they made projections, and those projections were done in good faith. What we have now is real data of actual receipts by the county from those systems. I think it'd be worthwhile, if you guys are interested, for me to spend the rest of the week giving myself a brain hemorrhage trying to figure out the financials on these. What would the benefit be to the county in terms of dollars over, let's say, the 20-year lifespan of a commercial wind energy conversion system? It wouldn't be terribly complicated. It would be pretty straightforward, a simple PowerPoint presentation of the information at hand now in Hutchinson County with their wind energy conversion system. And I think it'd be really worthwhile for all of us to see it. There's some serious money that comes into the county from those wind turbines, but it's not what was originally projected. So I think we'd be smart to look at that information. And I haven't made a final determination about how I feel about this, but at this point, I would be ready to say large commercial wind energy conversion systems are prohibited in Yankton County. I'd be willing to go that far. No, I would have to complete my financial analysis to be sure that I still feel that way, but that's the way I feel now. That's what my gut is telling me. So if you're willing to listen for 20 minutes or so, I'd be willing to do that for the rest of the week.
I'd like to just make comment, I would vote in support of that. But I did want to discuss one thing, because I had some thoughts, and I've been doing some more research and stuff too. The NIMBY aspect of this thing, the visual look is, I've had trouble with that, because there's a lot of double standards and, you know, stuff like that, and you wanna say it's, and I still think it's not a real thing. I don't think it should be given credence for me saying, I don't wanna look at it. And I say that because we allow, I mean, lots of ugly things to get built. Hexane extraction plants inside Norfolk city limits. I mean, all kinds of things are built by man that are not visually appealing. However, okay, when I heard some of this testimony that came in, is even though I personally don't give that argument credence, okay, but that doesn't mean other people don't. And that property values, if you are too close to one of these things, you're gonna get hurt. I mean, economically. The county's gonna get hurt economically. Because if they are too close, that is a real thing. Who the heck wants to live next to one of those? So that was one thing, and if we could just say, we don't want to deal with it. We're not experts. There's no vibrational analysis. There's a lot of analysis that's not getting done, that's not even being asked for. We're not the experts in this. Get back to us somewhere down the road on this. Let's see how everybody else is doing with this before we say yes. Okay, if I thought we could do that, that's probably the easiest thing. One other salient thing that I took out from the comparison of neighboring counties is that there's a differentiation between those that are participating and those that aren't. Because the only people, but there's, you know, the average citizens of Yankton County do not benefit from these systems. It's the big company, and I'm not getting into judging how the system works, goodness knows. But it's the big guys and the property that it's sitting on and the lead dogs that set up the projects for the big boys to come in and buy out. Those are the only ones that, everybody else is just a lever, it's just a measure of how much they're negatively impacted. And I think the zoning should be split, because right now it's 1,000 feet from residences. That's it. But the other counties have a differentiation between participating members and non-participating members. And I think that's very important. Because if you're participating and you're getting paid, you're getting economically, you know, impacted positively from this thing, and you want to live within 1,000 feet, great. That's your option. But for non-participants, I think we have a higher standard of care for citizens that don't want to have anything to do with these things and don't want to be impacted by them. And I think that is quite a bit more distance. I don't think the government of the county should be in the business of taking people's rights away. They should be safeguarding them. And in this case, I would rely upon a stringent setback, 2 km at minimum or 2 miles from non-participants. But if the non-participant wants to participate, that's on him. Because if we say, it's gonna be 1,000 feet whether you like it or not, he's got nothing. He's got no leverage, he's got nothing, unless he chains himself to the whatever, you know, there's no leverage. But if you say 2 miles, now he's got some leverage. And we've heard from testimony that even 2 miles is not necessarily no impact, but, you know, I think that's gonna deal with a lot of it, the noise and the flicker and the vibration and the shadow. And 2 miles away, you're not gonna get that much of it. You may get, your property assessment may not benefit from that, but it's a little bit of give and take. But the property owner then has leverage. And if they wanna put a big old tower in to make all these megawatts, they have to come knock on the door. And they have to ask, and they have to make a deal. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. Any other comments? Mike?
I was going to follow up. During the last 3 weeks, I've had an opportunity to first of all, I go back to at least 2006, being involved with wind energy and involved with the impact of it in the Yankton County. And during the last 3 weeks, I've had an opportunity in 3 states to go and visit the actual sites of the wind farms. And looking at it from a perspective of what's the density, what's the distances, and how we, and even some of the reaction from some of the people within those areas. I was in Minnesota, and I also was out at Avon and that area, and down in Nebraska. And I think there's a place for maybe wind farms. I'm not supporting the wind farms as far as the ability to really put them up by large corporations to use the credits, but actually, if there is say, an opportunity for someone to want to use them, there are adequate areas in the country, in South Dakota included, that they may be appropriate, but I would go to what has been shared tonight, just even right here. Do we really want them in Yankton County? And it's interesting that if it's not a visual thing, that the video that we saw, one of the first ones that was shared with us here, the picture of the wind turbines on the front, open it up, wind turbines, right there. There's not a building on them. They're all for a distance out into an area that does not include buildings. So last week, when Ron was here, there was another, the first opening that we saw, wind turbines. Okay, again, no buildings, no residential involved at all in those. And it just caught me that, is that a message that's being sent? Yes, thank you. Is that a message that's being sent that maybe this is not the area that we want to consider wind energy, industrial matter, and also as far as the agriculture is concerned, it's one thing when you have those areas of initiative, let's say, hog confinement or those, of which that's something local, and it's something that the farmers' agriculture has generated. Here, it's outside sources of financing, that it's our dollars that's being put to use, not for anyone, but for the use of someone other than us. And it's not just US residents, as we know, it's countries around the world. And so I could go through a list here, but again, I actually went to the sites and did, kick the tires on each of them and tried to assess what's out there before I would be open to share comments like this. And I have plenty more, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments?
Yes, I think this group, our Yankton County Wind Power Task Force, needs to look at what the goals of this particular group was. And I think that has to do with being an objective analysis and writing the start of regulations, which are going to be turned over to the county commission for completion, right? In light of that, I'm having a lot of trouble hearing people talk about doing a financial analysis, but in the same voice, the same breath saying, well, I know it's a bad deal. Or the suggestion of a 2-mile setback, or a 1-mile setback, which of course is doing nothing more than eliminating any possibility of any large-scale wind energy conversion system, because a square mile is 640 acres, and you're going to have 4 square miles to have a 1-mile setback, and so the story goes. So my point is, I think some of us need to back up and try to be a bit more objective and fact-oriented and look for hard scientific facts instead of emotional delivery. We've heard a lot of that here from too many people for what we're trying to do here. So that is my suggestion. Thank you.
Other comments?
The Eagle gets 2 miles.
No other?
I think there's a lot of credence with what everyone has said here, and if you're thinking it right now, there are people in the community that are thinking it too. But we do have to remember what zoning rules are about. And we are given so much authority to make sure, essentially, that our county is developing according to how the people want it developed. And we know there are people in our county who want wind. And we know there are people in our county who do not want wind. So our task is to try to balance that, so we don't get this and we don't get this.
It'd be kind of just like the hog deal,
Exactly.
just exactly like the hog.
It's exactly like that. And the thing is, we now have confirmation, there is a real project looking within our county. And so the folks affected in that area, in my opinion, need to be heard. And I would hope, now that this is announced, and that's one reason I mentioned that call, that those folks would start coming in to either this task force, the planning commission when we go through, and certainly the county commission, and air their grievances or their support, or however you wanna say it. But you have to you just have to go back to, our goal is to allow folks to do what they want to without overly burdening their neighbors. And there are things in our current ordinance that address those concerns. Our task is to look at that and say, does that still apply? Have all of these wind farms that everybody has visited showing us that this is not meeting what this is doing and such. So, as far as the financial goes, and I caution again, and I think I did at the beginning, the financials of these projects should really have little influence over the rules we're making. Because we want money coming into our county, and those landowners will get paid a rent fee for their property. Because if you draw your box and you don't want outside money in your county, I can tell you right now, nobody's getting, there is no accumulation of wealth within your county if you don't do that. Our job is to say, you're coming to our county, this is the influence you're having on our citizens, these are the rules we want to help mitigate that. And that's what it comes down to. And having something that absolutely says there is no wind at all, I think is something we need to be careful with saying. But in that site, if we put a 2-mile setback, we're essentially saying no wind. Mike?
I'm just gonna comment, a little follow-up here, and not as a rebuttal, but just, I look at the hog confinement, and I sat through those meetings too. I think that's something more local. This is not local. This is an outside corporate structure, initiative that is looking at an opportunity to use someone else's resources, and yes, pay them for them, but are they really being paid fair equity? And I've gone through the studies I've done myself and others. Less than 4% of revenues that's generated off these units end up in the person that has the property. And without them, they would have nothing. I think also too, that as we're looking at these, that yes, they have the rights, they can do it if they want to, but at the same time, it's like transportation. We put up stop signs, we put up road signs for their protection. Now, I guess if they do not want to abide by them, then that's their situation. But I think we have a obligation also to almost like educate the public indirectly as best we can, the risks that are out there. Because we could pass ordinances, or not even have them, and just have it open. But is that what really we want to do as citizens, good for all?
Yeah, and I have no problem with trying to educate people, but where do we stop at our responsibility to educate people? And as far as
Or
like
inform.
the land rent, I mean, if my land was up there and I was planning on one, I'd be talking to everybody else in there and saying, you know what, guys, we need more, and everybody hang together. But, I mean, again, that is not in the purview of this. Do I think, at some point it is wise to check the taxes? Because if they come and apply, they're gonna say, we're giving this much money to your community. It's good to be able to say, well, this is what we see in other counties. How do we align that? I think that's good, but again, the amount of taxes coming into our county with the rules we're creating, they're not direct. I mean, cause if you're gonna start saying, well, your business isn't gonna make us as much money as them, they can come, you can't. You start picking and choosing, you really have to be careful going down that path, but I have no problem understanding exactly how things are benefited. But is it the deciding factor?
I think it's absolutely an essential thing that we understand the financial end of it.
And I agree, Don, I do, but what I'm saying is, if they're saying you're going to get $1 million a year to the county, and we end up
They
getting,
aren't.
and well, it's an example, and we end up getting 700,000. I mean, you know,
For
it's,
10 years, and then they take it all to the state.
that's on the schools. The county still gets their
Well,
property
that's
taxes.
a big bunch of money.
Yeah, it is, Don.
It'll come right out of the county budget.
It is, and I'm not defending what they're doing, but what I'm saying is zoning should have nothing to do with that decision. Zoning is about the health and welfare of our county. That's what zoning is about. It's not about,
Sure.
yeah, go
Well,
ahead.
I was gonna say, when I talked to the planner down in Kansas when we were doing solar, I mean, he said you cannot just outlaw it because of the fact that they will sue you. I mean, that's what he said, and I don't know if that applies to South Dakota. Because he said, you know, when I talked to him, he says, we will not have wind because we prohibited wind because of the fact we have the Flint Hills, and that's a protected area. And so it gave them the reason, or an excuse, I don't want to say use excuse, but the reason they didn't have to have wind because it would affect the beauty of the Flint Hills, but solar, you know, it didn't. And so I think that's something to consider, is the fact, I don't think you can totally prohibit it, but again, it's that balance you said, how can we, you know, but also too, you know, I'm not sitting here on this task force for myself, it's for my children. I mean, my first and foremost thought is, I'm 50 years old, who knows how much time I got left. You know, it's my children. I want my children to be here, the next generation, my grandchildren on the farm. And that's the thing I'm concerned about, is whatever money we get now, yeehaw. But what are my children gonna be left with? If you've got turbines, and again, whatever, technology changes. And the thing about it is, I look at all that gravel that was hauled out of that pit for down in Nebraska to put up those wind turbines. How much gravel and cement? What is it gonna cost? I mean, that land, to think that land's gonna be turned back into farmable land someday when the wind turbine, you know, technology is old hack. You know, that's the thing. Who's gonna clean that up? I'll be in the grave. It'll be my children or my grandchildren that have to deal with that. And that's the thing too that we have to think about, is what are we leaving the future? Yep, farmers may get paid a check nowadays, but is that enough to sustain the next generation? And, you know, is it just this generation that, you know, gets the money from it, but the next generation is left with cleanup?
Well, that's part of the decommissioning.
Right, it
section
is
of
the
it, and-
decommissioning, but it's still, again, it's,
And then the other side of that story is, we've got to think about our kids and grandkids and try to figure out where the hell they're gonna get electricity from.
nuclear.
It's 6 o'clock.
Yep.
Yep.
So our early
I gotta
ending
go.
time kind of went down the toilet there.
Let me withdraw my suggestion for the next meeting.
Okay. Withdrawn. I need a motion to adjourn before
I
everybody takes
motion.
off.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you so much.